That's okay. And maybe there'll be a part two. But to start, my name is 𝗙𝗯cie𝗂𝘁. This is the 𝗙𝗲𝗂𝐿 podcast. I am here with Paul and Craig, two individuals who are about to approach a subject and considerations that I feel will be worth the listen. So we can just begin. Craig, I'm going to turn the mic over to you and let you say hello.
Hi. Yeah, hello. Thanks for having me on here again. Yeah, this is a topic and a half, and I'm not going to lie, I'm quite nervous about entering this conversation. But at the same time, is everyone still here? You look like you're frozen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that you've introduced me to that I'm just going to say it. Lucifer, light. I'm still an entry-level being into this topic, for sure, 100%. But there's something I can't shrug off my shoulders, and that's the importance of light and vibration. And this is why I wanted to have this conversation, is because I recently delved into the revelations of the Bible and just saw some, what I thought was hypocritical words in the last segment of the Bible. And I just wanted to sort of try and get some clarification in this conversation on why Lucifer is considered a dark angel or a fallen angel or a satanic figure, when in actual fact, light gives birth and life to everything on this planet. And it's also the one ingredient that helps humanity stay positive and happy. Is if we reduce our vitamin D levels, we become depressed, saturated. So I can't understand the link. For the only understanding that I've got right now is that the reason why maybe Jesus would have made that claim is because the deterrent of bringing hope in and reliance into one man from what was essentially a Greek mythology where gods were a group of men governed by the skill sets that they've given their lives to.
Now, just to jump in and just get some clarity, no one here is an expert. A lot of this is coming on what is faith, what is experience, and what is possibilities based on who you are as an individual. And for me, there is more credence and value that comes out of these conversations than two people or three people strictly speaking from a boxed, educated perspective. So just know that no one on here, no one listening, we are all learning together. And so something that I heard you say is that you referenced Jesus, when if we're talking about revelation, we're not talking about Jesus. So I want to make sure that we stay clear that those two are not one and the same, because
John,
Jesus, excuse me?
John, Revelations is John.
Well, not even that. Jesus has nothing to do with revelation. It's two different parts. It's like the Bible has chapters. These are very separate chapters of what was being shared. So if we make the jump from Revelations to Jesus, make the jump in the conversation, because that is rhetoric that won't be easily bridged. So we started this off with, my interest is in revelation, light, Lucifer, misperceptions. If we need to get to Jesus, I understand how we get to light in that reference. Jesus is the light, the way, but let's just make sure we make the bridges. So I digress.
No, that's fine. I'm still new to this. So for me, I'm trying to understand the correlation between why, and this is why I introduced Jesus into the conversation, is because for me, the Bible is about encouraging to follow one man. Like I said, so Lucifer is light, which is for every man, which gives every man the equal amount of power based upon the light and the knowledge and the data they take in when they consume. So for me, my relation to Jesus is that. So why is Jesus painting Lucifer as a dark angel, which I think I've not read the entirety of the Bible, and I definitely don't know it word for word, but I spent enough time in a Roman Catholic school doing it in detention, writing enough of the Bible. So I gauged for me that Jesus has an agenda where he wants to paint Lucifer as a satanic figure to allow for satanic ritualists to operate in a certain way or in a certain arena. But why is there's such a divide between the light and Lucifer being dark and Jesus being the light, but being light, but not being dark? That all confuses me, because when I see the light, I see it from a physics point of view, where I see light as very, 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 very rapid vibration. That if you twin that with like cymatics and so forth, you get, for me, light, and that's not essentially Jesus, but you get God through that, because that's how you gain information. And obviously information is the ability to create and destroy, which is the ultimate term of what a God actually is. So when I look at it from that way, I can't understand why those two are so opposite, but yet so avidly followed, because I can see the light, which means I believe in Lucifer because I see the light, but I don't see Jesus, and I don't know if Jesus was real, and it's all very mythical. Like he could be real, but I see the light and I see the birth it gives to the plants and myself and my happiness and life around me. Shed some light for me, please.
So before Paul jumps in, I want to throw in this for consideration. There's a difference between Satan and Lucifer. And they're so often referenced to be the same individual, energy, ritual, organization. They're not. A group of Luciferians is not the same as a group of satanic thingies. But Paul, please jump in. I know the people want to hear your voice.
Well, I would definitely say that my experience with the practices or even beliefs around Lucifer as being a being of light is pretty limited. My background is actually a lot more, as a younger child, more like evangelical Christian, upbringing. I went to Sunday school and all that stuff, right? But now I would interpret the battle between lights, if you would say, or beings of light. On other conversations I've had with Cristiano, frequency is a really big difference. So there's sound, but there's also sound frequencies that are potentially harmful or damaging, or and there's other ones that seem to harmonize much more perfectly with whatever type of beings we are. I actually really believe that we're all interdimensional beings. So we're living in more than one dimension at a time. And so for me, where I kind of land on with Revelations is that it's a very, very trippy kind of vision. I don't know. I don't think it's likely that there was like some sort of hallucinogen involved, but it is very trippy, and it's a different vision of this Christ figure, right? So when we think of like Jesus or whatever, it's like some guy in sandals with the beard, and some people have different skin tones for him, or different hair lengths or whatever. But we kind of think of this sort of meek person, except for in a few times when he really goes after the religious people. But the spirit of this Christ, when it appears to John, is so dramatic that John, who actually seems to have some sort of knowledge or relationship with the spirit, literally is so scared he actually like falls dead, right? So there's this kind of natural thing that arises, and that is the very question that you're asking is the Christ the Christ? Is there an Antichrist? And what is Antichrist? How would you identify what the Antichrist is, right? So for most, like, I don't know, evangelical Christians, probably Catholics, basically would correlate Satan or Lucifer or any other imitator of what they determine is the true Christ is all the same thing. And so Antichrist is actually not like against Christ. So like there's not like a battle in the
it's not
it's not like the opposite.
Yeah.
It's actually more accurately would be imitation Christ or false Christ. So if you have one being of light that enters the scene and there's another being of light, maybe the point of it all is trying to get so good at understanding light that we can discern the difference between one type of light bringer and another.
So what I get from that is, on the end, is that Lucifer's association with light is associated with the same light that Jesus is associated with. It's different vibrations or frequencies of that light. And the way I take that is how, when I was going through North America, Canada, Alaska, when I met the different tribes out in the middle of nowhere, I was taught to look or try to discern between 12 to 15 different types of snow that they could see, like this types of snow. And yeah, just to look at a landscape of snow, and they can literally identify 6 to 7 different types of snow, how it settles, how it formed, what the moisture was, where to step, where not to step. Like their vision is tuned to that. So when you say that the Antichrist is not the opposite of Christ, it's just a different version of the light, that does stick with light bringer.
Yeah.
It just, go for it.
I really want to step in here because, like, the fundamental issue that I have right now is that Jesus is a being, or is fundamentally a organic being like you and I, or considered historically as a being. Lucifer is not a being. Lucifer is what it is. Lucifer is the term light. It's where I have to
so
question.
You're saying
lucid, when we lucid dream, we dream awake. So the term lucid, for me, the term Christ means, well, I've always understood it as messenger. So anybody can be a Christ. If you've got a message of light, you can be a messenger. If your message is dark, you're still a Messiah. You're still a messenger. You're still essentially the Son of God, like Jesus claimed. My only theory is that when you say Antichrist, well, everybody who is a Christ is an Antichrist if those Christ-like messages don't marry. So in this case, Jesus just carried a message. Like us three right now, we sit in a room, we carry a Messiah message, which in this case is shedding light, which in this case is giving people knowledge to understand the difference between what's right, what's right, God, and what's wrong, Satan, or whatever shoulder it is on whatever. So again, I have to question this is, when we're comparing Jesus to Lucifer, should we be comparing Jesus to Lucifer? Because Jesus receives Lucifer to be able to be the Messiah, to carry the message of light and love.
Okay, now I'm going to let Paul jump in because of his grin, but I just want to go back to these words again to be clear. Satan and Lucifer are different things, and Lucifer is the light bearer. I never understand Lucifer to be the light. So even taking that small little adjustment, are we talking about because you just said Lucifer is the light, Christ is a being. Is Lucifer the light or the bearer of light? Because then we're talking and take this whole conversation changes. Is Lucifer light or the bearer of light?
Well, that's the sun is the bearer of light. And the sun is the center of our universe, well, the center of our specific universe. And don't we worship the sun as God?
So just to be clear, in moving forward, Lucifer is light in your context. Okay.
In my context. Again, absolutely. There's no question of the fact. When you say he, because you use that as a word of describing it as a person.
Or it's
light.
Lucifer, as I understood, was the bringer of light, the bearer of light. The sun is different. Jesus is different. Christ consciousness is different. The term and the way you're taking on Lucifer justifies this conversation now, because I never took Lucifer to be equal to light. I took Lucifer to be the bringer or bearer of light. So now I have to take this in a different context, but I'm gonna let Paul jump in as I get some coffee.
Yeah.
I've definitely heard of Lucifer referred to as the angel of light, a bright morning star, various different things in the Bible.
Okay.
But very clearly, what they would have called Yahweh, the God of creation, they say that is he's pure light, and in him there's no darkness. So you have two different descriptions. So maybe for some people, Yahweh means light in the same way that Lucifer means light.
Yeah.
To you. And so I'm not too worried about the word or the definition or the name. Certainly, I can understand why you would think there's some sort of issue if people are referring to light as somehow evil or bad or wrong. So if I understand your definition of what Lucifer is, it's just like water or energy or fire or something like this.
So for me, it's data. It's data.
All right.
It's knowledge. So I have this way of putting this thing together, is that when you receive light, you are able to decipher data, and when you're able to decipher data, you're able to gain knowledge. And when you're able to gain knowledge, you're then able to decipher what needs to be created and what needs to be destroyed.
Right.
And that's where I settle on, is that, okay, this is maybe where the meaning that I really want to push out in this podcast is that I believe the misdirection here is that everyone believes out of themselves, when in actual fact they need to believe within themselves, because they are the receivers of this godlike power.
Right.
It's the receivers of this knowledge to become the god or goddess within themselves.
Okay, so that definitely gives me a couple things to converse with you about. A couple of things that come to mind. First of all is to understand the end, you have to go to the beginning. So there's two trees in the garden. Okay, so if you're going to start the story with the serpent, and there's a tree of knowledge, of the knowledge of good and evil. And so not all knowledge is necessarily beneficial, in the same way that possibly not all light is beneficial in terms of understanding. Maybe wisdom and knowledge are different in some ways as well. But so that I just wanted to say that there was a beginning to this book, collection of books or whatever that we're talking about. And so the end in some way should relate to the beginning. So there were also, during the time of the Noah and the floods, there were beings called watchers, and they were giving knowledge, special knowledge to the human beings. And there's also some potential of there being interdimensional procreation happening there, resulting in very, very strong and very intelligent beings. So there's all these little bits and pieces, and this Bible that has a book at the end of it called Revelations is really just like a collection of different people's in attempts to describe what it is that they're experiencing and how they got out of this terrible problem, or their God is better than this God, or that, you know, their sacrifice was more worthy of another person's sacrifice. So I can only look at Revelations, honestly, and the various different characters, because I don't have any experiential context outside of, like, so to me, Lucifer is actually a being, is a created being by the creator of all things. So it's just the limitation in my experience and ability to like fully embrace that all knowledge coming in is good, and that all light is essentially pure and good. So that's
interesting.
That's the sort of the way.
I'm going to throw a twist in. So what if Revelations is really visions with people high on poppy seeds and mushrooms, with the grip on the current world, and they're trying to depict this thread of reality that exists in both. Mm-hmm. If you take Revelations as a mushroom trip or an ayahuasca trip or one of these trips where you interact with yourself or another being or realm as it's been described, it seems so spot on. But if you try and take this in the current 3D realm and look at it either literally or separately as spiritually or separately as like mysticism, you'll get lost trying to find that bridge. But if you've ever experimented with the keys to different dimensions, Revelation makes a lot of sense. Now, right now, with the world we're living in, never before have I seen Revelation be so pertinent to the current times. And it's eerie because for years of my life, people who know me, I was so adverse to religious stories, because I studied all these texts. I studied the Talmud, I studied the Quran, I studied the Bible, I studied Buddhism, I studied all these things that were, and it wasn't until I zoomed out maybe 15, 17 years ago where I've just realized they're all talking about similar experiences in this realm we live. So how can we put them together? And as I got closer and closer to seeing how the full story unfolded, that's when I was ejected from the Matrix. It wasn't even that I walked out. Once you start to put the fact that all of these things, all of the myths, stories, all of the calendars and histories, all of the religions, all of them are talking about the same experience from different interactions. You start to get to this centerpiece. And so, yeah, you have to take Revelations for what it is. Is it the end all, be all? No. Should you take it literally? If you're on shrooms and going through an ayahuasca trip, maybe, because it'll be easier to see and relate to. But Craig, I see you hop in to jump in, talk to me.
Yeah, man, because my experience is so polar opposite. It's unreal. Obviously, I grew up doing and listening, I studied the Bible for 2 schools. I went to 2 Roman Catholic schools. Then I did mushrooms for the first time, maybe 2.5 years ago. And I did it in a way that just wasn't particularly normal. I'd put it in lemon juice and let lemon juice sit there, and I necked it, and I came up really quickly. Really, I came up within, I was high within like 15 minutes.
What was the purpose of that? Was there something that you knew for the reaction or an idea?
So before I do stuff, I tend to do research on how to do it and what the best ways are and what the worst ways are, so I can respect the drug. So I want to respect it. I've grown up doing lots of ecstasy and all sorts. So I've learned to respect it. So I just did a little bit of research, and I found out that our stomachs are lined with lemon juice. So when you put the mushrooms in lemon juice, you're essentially breaking down the psilocybin into 𝗙𝗪, which is what your stomach does anyway, to get it into your blood. So I just thought, stuff it. I don't want to wait an hour and a half. I just want to get high. And I did. And I was high within like 15 minutes. But the weirdest experience happened. And a friend of mine who I'd spend a bit of time with, Romanian guy, going through a real tough time. And I'd literally been up maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. I was seeing things in my ceiling move. It was all beautiful, really hard to handle. But my friend knocked at my door, and it was like the worst thing that possibly could have happened, because I was going through serious paranoia at that point. I was like, oh my God, what's happening? I was challenging my ego, and I didn't know I was challenging my ego up until, anyway. But he turned up at my door, and I opened the door, and he was crying, and he was really emotional. He couldn't get a word out. But every time he made a noise, colors come off of his shoulders, both red and green, letting me know what emotion I'm pulling closer to. And I was able to just bring him in, converse with him whilst seeing stuff, and it calmed him down, hugged him. And it was an experience where my ego was completely destroyed. And I knew that I could handle that. And I still went high and high after that. But that experience after that made me start seeing meaning in things that I'd never seen before. I tested it. I started watching films while I was high, and I could see different meanings in different things, why things were happening, what relations to the past have happened, and why my life experience is triggering me to think. I was really in tune with my brain. But after I'd started.
So right now, we're going to take a pause. This is the end of part 1. If you want to hear the rest of Craig's story after this musical interlude, continue on to part 2.
We've all heard about the day that will come when the acts of a few will affect all life on earth. A day where a strong body and a strong mind will not be enough. There is a day foretold where the heart of our passion, our will to transcend, and our bond of unity would be pushed to limits untested. That day has arrived. The battle for our souls has begun at a time when we are rising. The truth has been twisted and tempers have been tampered with. Before we decide whether to love the earth or destroy it, we must brave the void where our darkness is greatest. Find the stillness within and feel the calm. We are more than we are now. We have the answers within us. Let us end the trend of revolution and transcend. For if it is not for the betterment of us, if it is neither fair nor just, if it is not based in love, we won't say okay.
Won't say okay.
Welcome back to part 2 of the 𝗙𝗀𝗋𝗃 podcast. I'm here with Craig and Paul. And if I had to go on what this conversation is building into, I would say this is part 2 of what if you read Revelations after mushrooms and ayahuasca? So, Craig, you were talking about after taking shrooms, dipped in lemon juice, which actually advanced the process of what happens in your stomach. You begin to watch
a couple of other processes as well. I didn't eat anything during the day, so I removed all preservatives from my body. I drained them out, so I cleaned my body out. I only drank water and I only ate fruit during the time. So I specifically ate apples, oranges, and I had a bowl of fruit beside me. So yeah, it's it was bizarre to say the least, because obviously when he turned up and had the colors essentially coming off of his shoulders in shockwaves. It was like little shockwaves of things coming off of him. It was very, very weird. And he obviously gone through what I'd gone through and seen something that triggered me to look closer at life. It's probably the best way to say that, because from that point onwards, I was seeing things. The one thing that really made me panic throughout the whole time there was my ceiling. My ceiling has got little marks in it that when I was going through my experience, it looked like a plasma screen to another dimension. I'd have to show you my screen. It's like little carvings of like extra paint layers that it's really bizarre. But in the center is a circle that goes around my light bulb. So I was seeing all these experiences and going through whatever I was going through, and basically just seeing, as I said before, seeing meaning and stuff. But I've had the experience 3 times since, and only recently read Revelations, which is the opposite of what you've done, because I've read Revelations after I've been through my psilocybin experiences, and I've read it, and Jesus comes across very egotistical to me, and very oppressive, and a very hypocritical in the terms of, when I read it, it came across like he was saying, well, I want you to repent, or not him personally, but John was saying it on his behalf, where he mentions God has given him, the light has given him the keys to death if you don't repent. And the Bible is all about asking you to repent for the commandments. And if you don't abide by those commandments, you must repent for them. So I just found that as hangabout. Well, what if I don't agree? What if I don't agree with some of the ways you're doing things? Like, for instance, telling people they have to do this, otherwise they will not go to heaven. Well, let's question our idea on what heaven is, first of all, because heaven's not appealing to me. That heaven is death. You can only get to heaven once you die, and that's not appealing to me. I'd rather stay alive. So when I look at that and look at the way John specifically words things, and just the general Bible in itself, it makes me question, and this is why I start seeing meaning in things. It makes me start questioning the people that wrote the book and why the book was created. Because the Torah and the Quran was created at fairly similar times, and they cover the other 3 points, which we know the 33 of everything is the balance. We know 3 allows for the balance of everything. In music, it allows 3 of everything, allows for us to think and hear things and perceive things slightly different, and it allows for enough movement for it to keep people interesting. 3 is the magic number in volume, in amplitude, in amplification. So when I start seeing the meaning and stuff in things, I start looking at the Bible, and I can't help but look at it and go, this to me is written by a group of Romans to take away the ethical meaning of what Greece had, which was multiple people can be gods for this planet in their own specific areas, whichever they so desire. And from that point, they will be God of whatever it is they focus their life on. When it's good, if it's bad for the species won't accept it, because that's the way we work. Okay, it can be misleading, and that's the problem we're in right now. Everything's being misled. But when the Bible was created, for me, I read it as coming across as, well, this is to me a soft way of getting people to take a knee to authoritarian ways, where Greece was not that way inclined. My understanding of Greece was that it was very open. Okay, they've got their nefarious stuff, and it seems everything we do in history has some form of. Go on.
So if I'm making a bridge, am I making the bridge that after you took shrooms and started to read the Bible for the first time, Revelations for the first time, you took it as John or Jesus seemed to be entitled sharers of a controlling vision for the masses, as though light and Lucifer was taken to be the many and given to be filtered and not applicable to all? Is that a safe, loose assessment?
It would give credence to why the Bible is so focused on painting Lucifer as a dark angel. It would give credence to that. In my mind, it would.
All right, so let me jump on to what I get from that. I have never associated Lucifer with the dark angel. A fallen angel and a dark angel are very different. Lucifer was a fallen angel, as were the Nephilim. Or was it the Watchers?
Yeah, the Watchers were
fallen angels, which means they, whether purposeful or incidental, accidental, they came from an elevated space. I'm keeping this real neutral for interpretation.
No, I think I know where you're kind of going, because I've touched a bit on the Nephilim and stuff.
So I don't get Lucifer. Never have I associated Lucifer with dark angel. For often I hear his name associated with Satan, which is why there aren't many children named Lucifer, because of this long-standing connotation. However, if you understand the occult, if you understand symbolism, everything is the opposite, which is the origin of this conversation. As you started to find and uncover things, you shared these things with me, and you were like, Cristiano, everything seems wrong. It all seems off. Like, why should I be against, or why is Lucifer depicted to be negative when Lucifer is light, and light is information, is data, it's everything. So that's where we started. So I kind of want to make sure that I'm not jumping too far when you jump to Greece and so forth.
The marriage for me personally is because it's affiliated with Satan, and Satan being dark. When you look at someone who is satanic, there was one guy from Austria who's dressed all in black, kind of draconian in look.
Well, let me finish this one thing, is that when you get to going from Greece to Rome and speaking on how it went from all possibilities to a controlling structure, let's remove Greece and Rome and realize that historically, this is known, from Constantinople to the various meetings on the destructions of so many mystical things. This was before Greece. Before Greece, there was a whole bunch of knowledge amongst the Cometians, often referenced as the Egyptians. And before the Egyptians, there were the Nubians. And there was so much information and awarenesses of stars, constellations, mythical creatures and beings that existed. And this allowed for different societies and cultures to exist and move around and interact. And there was a colorful existence that would trade stories, ideas, and resources. And how do you control people? Is you get them under one language, and ideally one belief system. So I think it was above Rome. I think it's associated with Roman Empire and people, but no different than how the occult, the deep state, these darker forces are above any association to an organization. I think the consolidation of religions, cultures, the mystics was purposeful, and is actually mentioned by one of the gods. It's the reason we say Amen, Amen Ra, is because there was this one guy who came and says, hey, there will be no other gods except me. All this other stuff needs to be consolidated. I am the one, there will be no others. And you can look this up in the Enuma Elish. You can look this up if you follow the story of the Anunnaki, Enlil. Even the story of the creation story of Adam and Eve mimics other ancient tales that predate the Bible. It's just that there were no words. No one was really writing. It was limited. So let's not get stuck on who did what, because everyone's mirroring someone else. Everything is mirroring something down. So I'm with you on that. Somehow, there was a moment when everyone had the possibility to get light, data, and information. Then later there was this control structure that took this amazing thing and filtered it, consolidated it. And even if you want to look at Catholicism, yeah, you got to go through these set dudes, through this set structure to deliver your message and get forgiveness to get to the all. It's like,
yeah, it's kind of like systems as well. So there was a system that Babylon had. Nowadays, we might say the Babylon system.
The Babylonians.
Get away from that. But these systems of control and power and, in a sense, religion or ritual, various practices that even back to Revelations, the first church,
they sound like they got really judgmental, and they're being commended for separating themselves from various characteristics, but they got too judgmental, self-righteous. But one of them was the Nicolaitans, and I was like, I don't really know anything about Nicolaitans, so I kind of looked that up, and that there's not that much that's known about it. But the Nicolaitans were likely mixing their messianic and Jewish following. So basically the earliest church was called the Way, and it was a mixture of people that were slaves, they were masters, they were people that were ex-Roman soldiers, or men, women, children, cripples, blind people, gladiators. Like, all of these people were like brought together in a way that was so offensive to the system of very, very hierarchical, like strict lines of all of those things. Like, so if you were in a different class, you stayed in that class, or if you were born a slave, you stay a slave. That's like, there's no changing that. But these people that were following this, Jewish carpenter, they were breaking every kind of norm you could think of. And they seem to have found a new way to be human. And that was scary to that power structure. So I would say the Roman system was in a way very similar to the Babylonian system, which you could say is very similar to the German system in World War II, or potentially very similar to various other dynasties or empires that have been built. And we are currently living in a system that is turning into a global system that's got some very similar power and control, and kind of willing to use anything to maintain that. So it might not be religion anymore. It might not be a book, a dusty old book from 2,000 years ago. Now it's potentially the data and the scientists and the whatever the speakers of the message is.
All right.
Whatever that message is.
I want to throw
right?
something in as
sorry.
you keep going. This is, okay, so for me, I just hit a critical point of where this conversation has defined leaps in definition. It seems like we got to the progression of, we started with Lucifer, and we all agree that Lucifer has an association to light, whether it's the light bringer, bearer, but there's an association to Lucifer and light. Then it was proposed that, what if you take the book of Revelations and remove yourself from the constructs of this world in 3D? Say you did shrooms and ayahuasca and then took in Revelations. How would you digest it? Then we jump to questioning when light was for all, could uplift all, and then where it became controlled. Information, awareness of this data became filtered and further separated. Society, humanity changed. And now we're at, and so religion was politicized. Like, okay, so religion means to practice. That's what the term means. To do something religiously is to practice. And so, Craig, it seems like, this is so cool. I'm trying to get it out right. It seems like we're talking about, okay, there was a time when the world practiced things. Everyone practiced their own things. And what's the best way to control someone? Is through their art, their culture, or their practices. So religion became politicized for power. And now we live in a realm where, okay, the world's changed. People aren't as religious. So we have to take over their other practices, which would be media, which would be diet habits, or with more light and data, which is what the internet shares, we can actually take people down the data points and look and work with them as nodes. So we no longer need to look at you through these older processes of group practices or religions. So literally what we are talking about is the progression of control and information, because Lucifer, light, information, data, no matter how you want to look at it. But if you progress to now, we're looking at, okay, yes, it's not really how we looked at old religions, but we still are looking at people's practices for control. All right, jump in.
I've got nothing to say to that because it is true. It's understanding the religion of sound and vibration, of what it can do for people. Back to the original conversation, linking it back to 432. It's maybe what it is that over time physicists have evolved to learn, like our first ever conversation was, that you can control everything if you understand what frequency does in the first place, and what the energy of what that does, of what light can do, and the harmonics of what light can do for every single being. So the evolution of us is to, once we understand that, is to then be based with a decision on what do we do with that knowledge. And that's where, for me, the symbolism of God and the devil comes into play.
I'm going to throw in one thing, just because we're talking about symbolism and knowledge. If I really wanted to impart something on both of those right now, I would have to make you aware of how the term understood is misused. And that would have to be me explaining what the difference is between lawful and legal. Men are different from persons. Persons have legal restrictions. Men have lawful agreements. Common law, admiralty law, legalese, all different. When you say I understand you, understand is actually a term that applies to statutes and contracts, where you make an agreement and I stand under you in this agreement. And we say this and repeat this so much. So if I really want to elevate and leave with a key of consideration, as we talk so many times about words and symbolisms, you should be conscious of when you use the word understand. Okay. That is literally putting you below the awareness of who or what you're in contract with, or in conversation or exchange with, and you're not. I understand you doesn't put you above or below. It just internalizes and processes, but under does give you a stature of a lesser awareness. So be mindful of just using that. No different than how we got on the term revolution versus evolution. These are just little steps to understand what spells, words, and vibrations do. So I understand what you're saying, and I just want to impart that for consideration.
No, I appreciate stuff like that, because I, as you probably understand, I like to speak well, and if I'm speaking wrong or not using the words correctly, then I want to make sure that I bloody well am. And I appreciate that, I really do. So you said the replacement word would be Innerstand?
That would be an option. Like, as you're exchanging and you are really trying to consider something, it's like, I understand this. I understand this now. I understand, not understand. I understand. I'm not below it. I have taken it in.
You know, there's actually a interesting way of saying that in somewhere in my background. It's like, oh, that's becoming flesh in me.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I could believe or understand the concept, but like, until it's internalized, almost like consumed, like bread, or it doesn't really become anything until it's part of you, and there's no way to separate it from yourself or from your own being, not just only flesh, but like from you
are it.
Your being.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And it's funny because that's what religion does. Religion is to practice something so much that you become it.
You no longer have to talk about it. People can look at you and say, oh, that is, or they do this, because you see or they exude it. You just become it. And that is the purpose of religion, to practice. It was never really associated with spirituality or these things that became later known, but religion itself just means to practice.
So to practice as a symbolism.
Just
to practice.
Just to practice
the bad. No, to not do the bad, and practice to do the good. And
I'm wondering, like, I have a ability at any moment to put myself in a different dimension. Like, I can have it in the middle of a conversation. But do you guys have that same? Is that normal? Okay.
Okay.
I mean,
normal?
is that like human? Is that is that something that other people experience? I guess you guys specifically.
The dimensional thing. I'm going to be honest. I vaguely, and I'm going to use the word properly, understand, because I've traveled on through a wormhole thing. Sort of, it was something once on a meditation session, not on a drug psilocybin experience. It was on a meditation session, and I couldn't quite make it fully out what I was doing, because I hadn't been meditating. I meditate in a different way, so I meditate through playing music rather than listening to it and shutting off. So I've done it before where I did that, but I can't concentrate. I can't. I'm not educated enough to concentrate for an hour and a half. It's just not me. So I get there, but I do that through music. So when I was essentially the medicine, I've never experienced going into I don't think it's another dimension.
Yes, you have. The thing is that when you went onto your shroom experience, you actually had the keys to a different dimension. When you take shrooms, when you take any of these plant medicines where people see these figures and shapes, do you realize that these figures and shapes have been seen for thousands of years? There are drawings on walls next to mushrooms that show the same shapes and questionable figures that people see now when they go on mushroom trips. A mushroom trip is literally a key to a specific frequency that is taking place. You do not start a mushroom trip as a baby and grow up. You start where the story is currently going on, and it lasts for as long as you have this key, and it fades out. No different than ayahuasca. People go on this individual trip into a realm where they all have similar experiences, similar tales, but it is your individualized reaction to it that makes it something to see and share. So yes, you have. You just have to understand that we are all living through veils of possibilities. And every time we either go in, or if you choose to go out, understand that you are in control of how you perceive these things. So if you say you haven't been in another dimension, and I hear you tell me about the mushrooms, I'm like, you have. How much control, how much awareness, how much of that you perceive to be what it was is a different thing. But I listened to you take me to a different realm today.
Yeah, okay. I didn't understand that was another dimension. Okay.
And see, Paul is referencing the ability that we all have to go into another dimension at any given moment, because the mushrooms don't stop it from happening. They just give you a different way to get there. And some people can just go. I can astroplane in a matter of 5 minutes once I just let go of this and realize that I just don't want to be here anymore. I want to go see my friend somewhere else on a timeline that doesn't exist. Some people call it daydreaming, but for those that really do it, that's the only way to describe it to you, because it's not daydreaming. I'm not dreaming, and yes, it is day. I'm just not here right now. Whether it's for you 30 seconds, 10 seconds, it could have been a whole hour in this other realm. I'm just not here. So yeah, I do it.
It's even almost sometimes like what this is experiencing is the avatar, and I have the ability to go to where the controller is. Yeah. And there's other characters or people that I know are my friends in that. Other beings, but like it happens in the middle of conversation, and it's like,
yep.
I'm like, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this idea? And it's actually a conversation happening sometimes with that dimension while that conversation is happening here in this dimension. It's like, okay.
Okay, I do that a lot.
So it's not like I'm tripping. It's more like I just acknowledge or frequently recognize that I believe all of us are in another dimension at the same time. It's just we just don't always have that consciously happening in our mind.
Would it be fair to say then that is tedious link right back to the beginning of the conversation, but is that lucid dreaming?
Well, so I was going to mention too about the vision, like dreams and visions, because those are essentially the same thing as some of the medicinal plants that are used for that dreaming. Okay. And of course, you have some that have used like sweat lodges and other extreme deprivation of food or light or water or various things. So I could never tell you definitively whether or not like John of Patmos was tripping on something, but it was definitely maybe we don't understand how the interaction between this dimension, which some people might call like a spiritual world or just another dimension, how that interacts with us physiologically. But there is definitely the physiological components to just completely take you out into that other dimension, and I think likely with death, possibly permanently into that other dimension.
I'm telling you guys, if you take the entire Bible or just most text in the dimension of shrooms, again, ayahuasca, where you can still be present and like right, and you still have this awareness of both worlds, you will take it in totally differently. Mm-hmm. And it just all becomes a bit more legit. I mean, we're talking about flaming chariots, which sounds like spaceships. When you see the visions, it's like, man, this sounds like a rocket ship or some really far advanced technology. And the thing is, if you don't read it with the awareness of what dimensions are and possibilities, I'm telling you, this third dimensional construct of time really throws off what is locked in these stories. Because I mean, John had a vision, man. And like, when I take it in now, when I look at the world and these alignments, when I look at what is called synchronism, which is the current study of taking everything that has ever been shared as one thing, we are in an epic moment right now. And Revelations has never been so tasty. I mean, it's amazing. And so this conversation is going to come to an end, this part two, because I think we touched on what we needed to touch on, and it gave us other things to consider, which is taking shrooms and then reading Revelations. I'm not saying go do that. I'm just saying that who knows what'll happen.
There's one thing I've just written down, actually, that's creating a reference to what you just, it really does tie in quite nicely everything that's just been said. There's my local cathedral, which once was the capital of England's cathedral, the capital of the United Kingdom. We have two cathedrals in my city. One of them has a person stood on the front called St. Julian. Now, St. Julian was an anchoress who wrote the book in the 1400s called The Divine Book of Love. Yeah. And this book she wrote when she went away and self-DMT'd for 7 days at a time, 14 days at a time, and she'd see visions, she'd see things, and she wrote the book now, which is apparently what's allowing for most of the crimes to happen, because apparently to do with the Bible, if you do your bad things for a good reason, and then I can't remember what the term is, you do, if you like not repent, but you do something in church, you go to like forgiveness or whatever, and you say sorry for it, apparently you'll still go to heaven. And this book is fundamental to the UK and why a lot of the Satanists are doing what they're doing, because Anchoress, St. Julian in Norwich, she's literally stood on the front of our cathedral. So there's a link there because she went and saw visions herself, and everything. This country is based a lot around her, what she's seen.
We got 300 seconds. Do you have any closing words that you want to share? Paul, anything you want to say?
It was great to meet you, Craig. And it's an honor to have a chance to have this conversation. So hopefully it was helpful for some people.
My name is 𝗙𝗪𝗂𝘁. This is the Candid podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, comment. You never know what your contribution does or what our next conversation or topic may be. I believe that we should engage in more communication through more channels, because censoring, banning, and the blockage is slowly increasing. And communication is the #1 way for us to grow. If we are truly separated from communicating effectively, there is nothing that can not separate and divide us at that point. So keep reaching out, keep looking to grow past your comfort zones, and know that love is an amazing thing to grab onto and exist within. So until the next episode, take care.